Hi Algebra students, this is Miss Wallace and welcome to the Desmos Graphing Calculator tutorial video. If you've already logged into your Schoology and you are in your algebra course, then if you will scroll down, you'll see the weekly schedule at the top, and if you'll scroll down to the very next link, it says Desmos Virginia Graphing Calculator. This is right above the welcome folder, and this link will stay here all throughout the year because we will be using it for a lot of things. So you'll always be able to access it when you are on this screen. It's right below, the very first link right below the weekly schedule. So if you will go ahead and click on that. When you click on the Desmos link, there will be an application that pops up inside of Schoology. So if you'll notice, there is a green sort of tab that runs along the top that says Desmos Virginia Standards of Learning. This is the graphing calculator that we will use all year long. So imagine it as sort of like your handheld calculator. Algebra students no longer use handheld calculators. We use online graphing software, which is Desmos. And so we're going to be using this a lot this year. And so it's very important that we learn how to use it. So we're just going to be walking through some of the things that this is able to do and how to work it today. I always think that inside of Schoology that this little screen is kind of small. So if you'll notice up here in the upper right-hand corner, there is a button that you can press and it will open the entire screen in a new tab, which I always think is very helpful. So again, notice at the top that it says Desmos Virginia Standards of Learning version. If you want to go ahead and click on the star here to go ahead and add this to your bookmark along the top of your screen, that would be very helpful just for ease of access throughout the year. Desmos also has an application for an iPhone or Android. And so if you go to the App Store or on your phone or the Google Play Store, if you have an Android, you can search for Desmos Graphing Calculator. The icon sort of looks like this. You're welcome to download this on your phone. It might be a little easier for you to, if you have your phone near you, to just go ahead and take that out. But it does the same thing as the online desktop application. I tend to prefer the online desktop because it's a lot bigger and I can see what I'm doing. So if you have this pulled up on your computer, notice that you've got sort of a white box over here and you have an X and Y axis over here on the left side. So you can think of the white space as sort of your workspace and where you can type in things, and then the graphs are going to come up over here. So we're going to take a look at the white space here first. If you'll notice at the very bottom of the white space, there is a button that if you hover over it, it says Show Keypad. So this is our keypad that helps us key in some of the things that we might want to calculate. So it looks very similar to a keyboard, or maybe if you have a handheld calculator, these are some of the buttons that you might see. So if you'll notice, there is a plus and a minus and a times and a divide, the 4 functions. You've got your numbers, you've got your equal sign, you've got your decimal. There's also buttons that have X and Y as variables because those are the most often used variables in algebra. We also have a squaring button and an exponent button. We've got parentheses and less than, equal to, greater than, and equal to. And we've got pi and the square root key, absolute value, and a comma. There's also an ABC button here, which toggles between the alphabet keyboard and the 1, 2, 3 keyboard. So we're going to keep it on 1, 2, 3 right now. We'll come back to the alphabet keyboard. There's also a button over here called Functions, and then there is a left, move right button. There's backspace, and there's also an enter. So if we want to do a calculation, let's say first we wanted to just type in something as simple as 5 plus 4. Now, I can use my keyboard, of course, on my actual computer, but if I want to type in 5 and then add 4, notice that the input goes here and the output, or the answer, comes out a little below and a little to the right of where we've typed in our input. So we can do the same thing with subtraction. So we've got 6 minus 3, and it'll give us the answer of 3. We can also do multiplication, and we can do division. Now, notice if you type in multiplication, it's going to look like the multiplication symbol looks like a dot. And also you can type in multiplication with parentheses. So you could also type in 6 and then parenthesis 3, and it will give you the same answer. If you use division, it's going to look like a fraction. So if you type in 14 divided by 2, it gives us the answer of 7, but notice that your 14 over 2 looks like a fraction. Well, that's because fractions are division. You can also type these things in with your regular keyboard. So of course the plus sign is up next to your backspace key. So if you want to type in 5 plus 4 without using the keypad, you can do that. The subtraction symbol is right next to the plus sign, next to the backspace key. So if you do 6 minus 3, you can type that in without having to open up the keypad. If you do multiplication, you have to use Shift and then 8, which gives you the asterisk, which is what Desmos uses as multiplication, the asterisk or the star. So if you wanted to do 6 times 3, you would have to hit 6 and then Shift 8, makes the multiplication symbol, times 3. And if you want to do division, you have to use the backslash, which is right below the question mark. So it's the same key as the question mark, but you do not have to hit Shift. So if I wanted to type in 14 and then backslash, hit the question mark key, and then divided by 2, it's going to give me the same thing. Now, the nice thing about Desmos is that it does keep your answers from previous problems. But if that gets a little overwhelming, you can always click these X's and it will close out any of the work that you've previously done in your white space. And so those are some of the things that are on the keypad. Notice, again, we have some buttons over here that we could use maybe for exponents. So if you wanted to do 4 squared, you can type in 4 to the 2nd power and hit the squared key. You can also do any exponent in general. So if we wanted to do maybe 7 to the 7th power, we could hit that button. And as long as your cursor is up in the air, you can put in an exponent. There's also square root button down here. We're going to use that a lot. Square root of 100 equals 10 because 10 times 10 is 100. The pi button will also give you the value of pi, 3.14159, etc. And also there's absolute value button. So if you need to type in absolute value of -9, remember absolute value makes a number positive. And so there it already encloses the absolute value for you and you get 9. So those are some of the things on the keypad. Of course, we've got our ABC button here, which will, you can toggle over and you can type in anything, any letter. You can also do that from your keyboard. There's some other buttons down here that we're going to use throughout the year. There's an exclamation mark, there's some brackets, there's some curly brackets, there's what we call either a tilde, or you may hear me refer to it as a squiggle, and there's also a comma on the ABC menu. There's also a functions menu, which we are going to need to use a little bit of, but if you'll go ahead and click on that, or if you look at it, notice that the first sort of sub-menu is called trig. So that stands for trigonometry, which you won't take till you're probably a sophomore or a junior in high school. We are not going to use this menu at all this year, so you don't have to worry about that. The next sub-menu is stats. We're not taking statistics this year, we're taking algebra. Statistics you may take as a senior in high school. So we don't have to worry about this menu. Also, the distribution menu, you don't have to worry about any of these buttons. However, the miscellaneous menu, which is the very last of the sub-menus, we are going to use some of these buttons. So remember, if I tell you throughout the year to, hey, that's on the miscellaneous menu, it's under the functions and it's the very last tab under the functions menu. So those are some of the things that you need to know about the keypad. The last thing that I want to show you here in Desmos is about the actual X and Y graphing, sort of almost looks like graphing paper over here. So we can actually graph points, and we're going to use this for a lot of different things throughout the year. We can graph points on the X and Y axis. If you go up here in your workspace to this plus arrow of add item, you can click on what says expression. We'll talk about that some, but right now I want to focus on inserting a table. So table of X and Y values. Remember, when you're plotting points on a graph, you can insert those as X and Y pairs. So if I say that X is 2 when Y is 4, if you'll notice over here on my graph, it actually plots that point for me. So if I go, remember, we have to go along the X-axis first to 2 and then up to 4. And I can do that similarly. I can keep going on my graph and click down here in the next X value. Maybe I type in 5 and I want my Y value to be 10. Now, notice I do not see that point, but that's because right now, the way that I can see my graph paper, I'm only seeing on my X-axis over to 10 and up on my Y-axis to about 6. But if I've plotted the point 5, 10, it's off the graph right now. That's where these buttons come in. So these are my zoom in and zoom out buttons. If I want to see that second point that I've plotted, all I have to do is click zoom out. And now I can see it at 5, up 10. Now, I know some of you will want to get carried away with zooming out. So if for some reason you ever zoom way too far out and you zoom out all the way to 400,000, Just know that you can always click the default zoom or the home button here, and it will bring it back into what it was originally zoomed at. You can also zoom in to make things a little smaller. So now we can only see up to 3 and over to 4. So again, I'm going to hit home. So that's how you adjust the settings on your zoom on your graph. The last thing I want to show you is the graph settings. And so there's a few things in here that you might need to know. If you're having a hard time seeing these numbers, you can always click on projector mode and it makes it a little bolder and a little easier to see. I tend to leave projector mode off though. If the grid lines get in the way and you're bothered by them, you can always turn the grid lines on and off. The axis numbers, I always like to leave them on, but if you don't like the numbers, you can always open them up here or take them off. Minor grid lines, that's these little light gray lines in the inside. If they bother you, you can also turn them off. If you like to have arrows at the end of your Y and X axes, you can turn them on and off here. Also the X-axis, if you want to change your zoom from here, let's say right now my X-axis goes from -10 to +10, but what if I wanted to change that to 100? I could type in 100 from this wrench menu, and now notice my X-axis goes from -100 all the way up to 100. I could do the same thing for my Y-axis if I wanted to, if I needed to see way up and way down. The step values are what it counts by. So right now, notice sort of default, you can only see up to 50 and 100. But let's say I wanted to instead have it count by tens. So the step values actually change what your axes count by. So notice now I can see I'm counting 10, 20, 30, 40. I can see those in between numbers. And so that is all of the things that are going to be relevant to us here under the graph settings. And so that is a very short introduction to the Desmos online graphing calculator. We're going to be using it a lot this year for a lot of different things. Make sure you have it bookmarked or make sure you know how to access it from the Schoology menu. And you're going to want to use this Desmos application for your assignments this year. Your next assignment, assignment 4, is going to be a pre-algebra review, and you are welcome to use Desmos as a calculator for it.